Now, not everyone on this panel was a child when this campaign was formed. Some of us were helping found it, and of course, for many years, chaired it as well. And it was only, he only resigned that commitment when he later became leader of the Labour Party, of course. But he remains a leader of the anti-war movement. And he's here to talk about Stop the War, the last 20 years, but he's also, of course, here to talk about the future. And, of course, he recently founded the Project for Peace and Justice. He needs no introduction, of course. Thank you for being here, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you all for being here today at this amazing 20 years on since the founding of the Stop the War Coalition. To me, it is like a sort of big family reunion, because what we have achieved over 20 years has to become an important and very significant part of democratic society, that we speak for peace, we speak for justice, we speak for human rights. When I became leader of the Labour Party, I was asked by a journalist a couple of days later, Mr. Corbyn, I assume you've already resigned from CND and Stop the War, and he listed a whole lot of other organisations, some of which I didn't know I was a member of, but I thought, well, I probably would have joined them if I'd been asked to. So I said, absolutely no. Why should I? He said, because it will cloud your judgment. I said, it will inform my judgment to build a world of peace, not of war. And if you'll permit me for just a minute or two to say something about those founding days of the Stop the War movement, because this lovely document about the 20 years War on Terror programme for today's event lists the people we should particularly thank. I know them all well, and I do thank them all massively. I just want to draw attention to those that are sadly no longer with us. Our great friend Tony Benn, the wonderful Robin Best, my great friend Tam Diel, Helen John, who did so much for CND and the peace movement, my personal great friend Mike Markesy, whose books are now on sale at Houseman's Bookshop, and of course, the wonderful, late, great Walter Wolfgang, who gave us so much wisdom. Those people gave their all their life, to try and bring about a better and just world, and I just think we should remember those contributions that are made. I'd also like to say a personal thank you to the group that's sitting down there, the gang of four that's sitting down there. Chris, John, Lindsay, and Andrew. Thank you so much. Stand up, come on, stand up, please. For just being fantastic comrades over all these years, and always being prepared to go that extra mile. And Lindsay and I sort of outbid each other on an arcane knowledge of the last train back to London from God knows where, God knows when, because we were very good at missing them in all the hundreds of meetings we've done to Stop the War Coalition. But that amazing founding meeting in Friends Meeting House on Euston Road, where Tarek and Bruce Kent and Tony, of course, and so many others spoke at, came in the wake of the devastation of 9/11. What happened in New York was disgusting, disgraceful, and utterly wrong under any circumstances. And so there was nobody was condoning anything like that. But our answer was to learn the lesson and build a world of peace, not start another war. And that's why I'm so full of admiration for Barbara Lee, the only US Congress member to vote against Bush's War Powers Act in September 2001. And so we established the Stop the War Coalition. We were astounded at the number of people that came to that meeting. I think there were 3,000. I made the same speech 5 times in one evening because the hall wasn't big enough, but that's okay. I hope it got better as it went on. And we also mobilized people in a cultural, music, artistic way also, because you don't win a political fight in a political argument without mobilizing people where they are to bring them to where we all should be. You don't just do it by dictate and diktat. You bring people together in their own environments. And that, I think, we're particularly good at. But debates on the left about patriotism, going to war or not, and supporting your country irrespective are not exactly new. There was a fascinating and wonderful article in the Morning Star on Wednesday saying that the first split of the left on war was actually in 1884 over whether or not the government of the day should send an expedition to free General Gordon, who was being held under siege in Khartoum. Some of the left, a very small number, said, yes, that was the right thing to do because he was British, therefore we had to save him. Well, they did send an expedition. He was long dead by the time they got there. And the expedition itself just proved the folly of the whole operation. But the same year, 1884, the Congress of Berlin took place, which drew with pencil and ruler all those lines on the map of Africa, which decided which European country would grab which part of Africa for its own benefit. It was the failure of some of the left to recognize that fighting for socialism and social justice in your own country also requires you to fight against imperialism and injustice in other parts of the world. And so we went to war in Afghanistan. We bombed, we destroyed, we killed, we bribed, we damaged, we destroyed. And then, 20 years later, British troops have left, American troops have left, others have gone long before. I hold no brief for the Taliban, I hold no brief for those that deny rights to others. But I do hold a brief for the right of people in their own country, in their own society, to decide their future, not have it decided for them by international military alliances for their own ends. And so we then, somehow or other, Blair and Bush decided that Iraq was the same as Afghanistan. And somebody said to me on a radio program in probably 2001, 2002 time, they said, Mr. Corbyn, what have Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein got in common? I said, there's one thing they've definitely got in common. He said, what's that? He was thinking I was going to say something interesting. I said, they both hate each other and both want to kill each other. And they then bigged up the idea that Iraq was a threat to the world with weapons of mass destruction. Remember those crazy maps which showed a weapon of mass destruction taking off from Baghdad and landing on Portsmouth 45 minutes later, and so on and so on. And our media, our supine, complicit mainstream media, went along with all of that. With some extent, this is not, and I promise you, this is not an attack on journalists, it's not an attack on free speech. I just say that media that is controlled by global interests like Murdoch seem to be more interested in supporting administrations doing the wrong thing than exposing the truth, as Julian Assange has found out to his cost with the years that he's been in prison. And so we went to war in Iraq, And we had that massive demonstration just before the war started. It was amazing. It was the first time in global history there was a global demonstration. We need to think about this, and we need to do it again. That global demonstration, 600 cities all around the world with a timeline of the same time for a demonstration. But there was one city that couldn't do it the same day because they had some other festival on that day, and that was San Francisco. And so I willingly and then reluctantly, and I thought it was crazy, said that I would go and speak in San Francisco the day after the Stop the War demonstration in London. So I had to run through the crowd at the end of the demonstration in Hyde Park to get a train from Paddington, to get to Heathrow, to squeeze onto the plane, last passenger getting on, get to New York, and the whole place is snowed in. Mike Marcus, he told me I could stay in a flat with him and other friends in Manhattan. I went there. They'd had a great party after their demonstration. They didn't hear me knocking on the door. So I'm out there, standing in the snow, unable to get anywhere to stay, while this lot are partying inside. Not very nice. Uncomradely, I call it. And then, somehow or other, we managed to get the last plane to San Francisco the next day. Massive, massive, massive demonstration. Joan Baez, Bonnie Raitt, and many others speaking there. That was the global power of the anti-war and the Stop the War movement. Now, I know it didn't stop the war in Iraq, but just as a generation was formed in solidarity in this very room with the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, those who formed their politics opposing the war in Vietnam in the 1960s and 70s, those that marched against the Iraq War and against the war on terror and the whole Bush-Blair project have never forgotten it and have learnt a lot from it. And that political hinterland is there for all time, and it's there for us to develop it even further. And so I simply say this. When people say we're unpatriotic, I simply reply this. I was asked a question in the last election by the Daily Mail. Mr. Corbyn, you're not patriotic, are you? I said, well, that's not a very good question. You ought to ask me if I am patriotic or not. And I said, yes, I'm very patriotic, actually, extremely patriotic. Prove it. How? I said, my patriotism is not leaving a fellow citizen sleeping in the streets, homeless and hungry, children going hungry, young people sent to war they shouldn't be sent to. It is about solidarity and protecting and supporting each other. That surely has to be the right way to do it. And I'm being reminded that it's time to finish, so I will. Thank you, Chair. You're very kind. I promised you I'd be on time, and now I'm not. I just finish with this. Last year, the killing of George Floyd, the growth of Black Lives Matters, and the development of a global anti-racist movement changed an awful lot of people's opinions and mind. People under oppression the world over saw in themselves the way in which black people in the United States had been treated. And they saw in themselves the hope for something better. So 2 days after this latest Cold War has been announced against China, with nuclear submarines from Australia, Britain, and the USA in the South China Sea. That's going to be an arms race bonanza for the arms companies of Britain, France, and the United States. It's going to be a bonanza for those that manufacture arms in China and in Russia. We're into some crazy world where we're increasing armament at a time when we should be getting over COVID, protecting the environment, getting over global inequality, providing water, sanitation, and health care for all. And so our answer to this is learn the lessons, the hard lessons of not always being able to stop the conflicts we tried to stop, but learn the lessons that we can stop the next one and mobilize people like never before against this new Cold War, against this rearmament, against injustice and inequality, but above all, on a global sense, an anti-racist sense, an anti-imperialist sense, and above all, give people hope and space, because hope and space is what will bring about real change in this world. Thank you very much.